Well, welcome everybody and everybody out in internet land to the world famous Adventurers Club of Los Angeles. We meet here every Thursday night, and if you can't come here in person, we hope that you watch us on the internet. Programs will be available shortly after them. So with that, we're going to get started. So I'm very honored that my friend, Kim Frank, and fellow Explorers Club member, and maybe an Adventurers Club member in the future, is here with us. She's quite a spectacular person. I've learned a lot about her recently. She's done amazing things, and I think you will find that to be true after this little lecture that we have, or conversation. So Kim, to the best of my knowledge, she's had a very interesting life. She's traveled many ways, many distances, both personally and literally and figuratively. She's come a long way. And it's interesting that now you're here to hear about her story about the elephant and human interface problems in northern India and near Bhutan and Nepal and so on and so forth. But this whole story really resonates with a lot of things that go on in the world today and in the past, in relationships between humans and the rest of the environment, and humans among humans and animals among animals. It's a fascinating story. I learned a lot by doing a little bit of deep research the last few days. So I want to start by asking Kim, how the heck did you ever get started doing this?
Well, now I can see the video here, which is I'm an unlikely explorer and an unlikely adventurer. I was a stay-at-home mom for many years, but always have had this deep sense of curiosity, and was kind of always driven by I kind of am an end of the roader when it comes to curiosity, and I'm relentless with my curiosity. So I raised my children to the point where they were in preschool and school, and then I'm now trying to think, should I answer this, when did I get into the human-elephant conflict story, or should I answer this more in terms of how did I get involved as a writer that writes about exploration and adventure?
Well, I think you could start with that briefly.
Yeah.
All right, and I believe the slide that's
Thank
up
you,
now
Phoebe.
may kind of give some indication to that.
So this is a quote that really struck me when I first read it, and apparently it comes from Confucius. And the quote says that we all have two lives, that the first one begins when we realize we only have one. And at that time in my life, I was in an unhappy, kind of toxic relationship marriage, and I realized that I wanted to have a stronger voice, and I wanted to be a better role model for my children, and it wasn't going to happen that way. So I made a very difficult decision, and the book actually has, interestingly, it has a memoir component to it that speaks to that time of transition, to where I was looking for something that I could reach my full potential, and that was not happening in the environment that I was currently in. So then, fast forward, and I was on a hike with a friend who's a National Geographic photographer, and we were in Sun Valley, Idaho, which is where I live, and she was telling me the story of she had just come back from India, and while she was there, she saw that there were elephants pooling in this one particular area, and that people were coming out and taking selfies with these elephants. And she had never seen anything like this before, and she was telling me on the trail. And then I had been writing stories about exploration in other people's voices, and including the big stories I'd done for Paul Nicklin and Christina. And I was writing a lot of exploration stories in other people's voices. And something she said when she told me that story, I just felt compelled I wanted to see it for myself. India was not even on
Was
my
installed
map.
along.
And there's the map.
Amazing how that shows up just when you think about it.
India was not even on my radar, but the story was very compelling to me. So this is the area that I've been doing most of my research in, which is, we're going to play this video in 1 second, but first I just want to explain that little narrow corridor right between Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, it's called the chicken neck. It's referred to as the chicken neck of India, and it connects the Northeast and the rest of India together. Elephants are getting compressed in this area, and then Nepal built a fence to keep them out. So this video clip is just going to give you an idea of the area and what's happening.
Indo-Nepal border to deter elephants from entering Nepal, blocking the natural migration route and forcing elephants to spread out along the India side of the border.
Now, one of the problems with this happening,
We
it's
can go to the
almost
next
like the elephants are going through a nozzle in your garden hose. They used to be able to go straight across to Nepal. They had their trails they've been using for thousands of years,
Right.
what you told me.
Yes.
And now they're being squeezed into a narrow area, and they're interfacing with the human population
Right.
in a way that they normally didn't. So there's a little bit of a rift. Now, interestingly, when you look at this picture, it's a beautiful picture of the landscape. You're looking at the high Himalaya mountains. I say
Yes.
Himalaya, she says Himalaya, potato, whatever. Just coincidentally, not too many years ago, I flew over this area at 30,000 feet or so, or maybe higher. And I noticed this area encompasses only about 120 miles
Right.
in width, from the highest mountains in the Himalayas to the Bay of Bengal in Bangladesh. So imagine, for example, going from out near, what's the Air Force base where the space shuttle landed? It's about 100 miles away, now out near Palmdale. What? Yeah, Edwards Air Force, maybe about 100 miles. So in that distance from here, you go from the highest mountains in the world to as low as you can go,
Exactly.
to the marshes of the coast in the Bay of Bengal. And I remember having a background in the geosciences, amazed at the topography, to go from looking at Mount Everest and these other mountains and seeing the land go down like in a stair-step foundation into different ecosystems all the way to the Bay of Bengal. So this is the area where all this action is happening. It's a very unique, actually topographic and ecological area where Kim is doing her study.
And so what was compelling to me from the beginning is that, people know about African elephants. There's a lot of support for African elephants throughout the world, but that very few people in the West in particular know about Asian elephants, that Asian elephants female Asian elephants don't have tusks, that poaching isn't their number one issue. The number one issue is deforestation and habitat loss. And in this particular region, the military infrastructure has become increased and the highways have become increased because they're trying to fortify the linkage between these two parts of India. So the elephants, of course, are spilling out over into human settlements. We'll go and talk more about the issue itself, but I wanted to say with this particular photo, this is Kanchenjunga, and it's the third highest mountain in the world, and it's the highest in India. I think I probably had been maybe 2 times, 3 times before I ever actually saw Kanchenjunga. Yet, on a clear day, when it finally clears up, you can see it from the entire landscape. So it was shocking to me to think about, and this is something that I pursue in my writing and with everything, is this curiosity of what does it feel like to not see something and then suddenly have it appear? And then it's been there all along. So I'm very fascinated by that which we cannot see. And there's been a lot of that in this story.
I feel like that quite often. There are things in front of me I don't see.
So I'm going to read an excerpt,
I think it's a great idea.
and my books are for sale. Okay, can I read this excerpt?
But I think before you
Yeah.
read for a second,
Absolutely.
how did you come up with the title, Elephants in the Hourglass?
When I first set out to tell the story, I actually wrote a whole first draft of the book, and it was just on the journey itself to explore the human-elephant conflict. And it was very dry, and there were bits in there that were very personal, but I didn't think I wanted to include it. The more I worked on the revisions, the more my personal story came out. And I was thinking about how there was an elephant in the room long before I saw the elephants in the wild. And I wanted to make a play on, the elephant in the room, but also speak to the urgency of the issue, not just the urgency as it is with elephants, but the symbolism of the urgency for our planet. And so, elephants in the hourglass.
Fair enough. Let's hear what you got to say.
Okay. So this is a scene later, much later in the book, but because I'm speaking at the Adventurers Club, I needed to go for some action. So there are scenes in movies where mere mortals find themselves face to face with beasts that dwarf everything around them. Motorcycles, humans, even trees look like they exist in miniature against the massive size of the creature. In these movies, the giant King Kong, T-Rex, or fantasy space monsters loom so large the human peril is clear. You can nudge him.
Better poke him. Still alive.
I am not taking this personally. Okay, are we ready? I'm picking it up. In these movies, the giant King Kong, T-Rex, or fantasy space monsters loom so large, the human peril is clear. This feels like one of those moments, only it is not fiction. Kishore leaps off Avajan's scooter with a cracker and a flashlight and lunges for the elephant, making a terrific sound. If he had planned to charge, the bull now determines it's not worth the trouble. With a dead-on eye-lock stare that lasts a second but feels like minutes, he turns and moves toward the field behind Kishore's house. He's walking slowly, as if to communicate that he's leaving on his terms, not because of the irritating sound. Everyone kicks into action, waking the neighbors, shouting for help to drive the bull from their backyards. Tufan takes me to Kishore's house, where I run into the outhouse with both relief and the terror of knowing the tusker is just behind these makeshift walls. When I come out, Tufan shows me a section of the house next to the toilet. There are only remnants, a cement foundation, and an irregular edging, a pile of mangled metal roof in a corner. Last week, late at night, an elephant crushed this part of the house, Tufan says. He leads me to the blue-painted room with the Gandhi portrait where earlier we had tea. I have my backpack and my sleeping bag. We'll be back, he says. Another perspective change. Now the eagerly anticipated shelter is as dangerous as sleeping in the forest. A dramatic difference between research and experience. I knew the houses got crushed when their inhabitants are sleeping, but only now does the reality of that vulnerability sink in. The situation here is this: you are not safe in your house. There is no protection. The elephants need food, and they don't have the food. We can say peaceful coexistence, but honestly, there is not much peace in what I just witnessed. Peaceful coexistence is the vision, but we are further away from that than I thought. Out there, it is a conflict, a full-blown war in the fight for survival.
I hope that,
Thank you.
yeah. I think it's very descriptive, and it is a war of
It
sorts.
is.
And if you let your imagination go while you were reading it, you can imagine being in the forest, or what
Yes.
was the forest, or in the tea plantations, and having these elephants who have nowhere to go, and they just trample your house and trample
That's
your
right.
friends and neighbors and relatives.
It's okay.
We okay? Okay.
It's okay. Okay. No, don't be sorry. It's fine.
It's really terrifying to think about it. You can visualize it. And I believe Kim actually has some footage that relates to that.
Yes, we can move to the next. So this is a montage that'll give you an idea, brings a little bit to life.
So I think you can see there's casualties on both sides. It's not just elephants, it's also humans.
So
Is
can
it
I add one
very
thing
well
that I should have
illustrated?
said at the very beginning of the, about 500 people are killed by wild elephants in India per year, to about 100 elephants that are being killed. In India, it's illegal to hurt or kill an elephant. So they're doing all types of things, even as family members are dying in villages. There's a lot of work and conservation work that people are doing.
I mean, I can't imagine sitting in your house and having this herd of elephants walk down your street and just crush your house. You're helpless. Or right out on here on Broadway, there's 100 elephants charging down here. How many people have been charged by elephant? Anybody have that experience? Yeah, I've had that, and it's very scary. There's really nothing you can do but try and get out of the way and hope the elephant changes their mind. So these people live with this all the time.
That's right. And what happens is the elephants are coming in so now that the human settlements are so close, the elephants are coming in to eat the crops. So the farmers are growing crops, but the rice paddy and the maize that the farmers are growing for their own food, the elephants are attracted by the scent. They come in and they are feeding themselves. They can have 7 times the nutrition in a much faster way in a safer environment. So they come in and they eat the food. And then they also will come into the villages and eat the fruit and fruit trees, or people will dry their food on top of the roofs, and or even rice beer. There's a lot of stories. Actually, we were talking about this earlier. There are a lot of stories where a bull elephant will come in attracted to the smell of beer, rice beer, go break the whole house apart to find the beer, drink it, and then go pass out in the back of the... Yeah, so the forest departments had to come and collect, take care of the elephants after they've been out drinking during the night. So this picture here is an example of a watchtower, actually. So the farmers, you can see that doesn't look like a very stable place to spend the night. And the elephants obviously are destroying actual houses. People are spending the night watching their fields in a place like this.
So how do the people in these villages feel about the elephants? I mean, I'm sure the relationship goes back many centuries. Are they protective of them? Do they understand the situation? Are they afraid of them? Do they hate them?
Yes.
All of that?
All of it. Traditionally, in India, there's been a reverence, and there still is a reverence for elephants as the god of the forest, or elephants as Ganesh, which is a god, the Hindu god Ganesha. They believe that the elephant has transformed into a god or is God, and that reverence is still. However, because of all the destruction, there's also a lot of anger, and especially with the younger generations. Do you want me to speak to this photo? So I'm very happy that Jeremy Lizelle is here tonight. And so after I wrote the book, I felt like I wanted to tell the story in another way. And so I embarked on making a documentary film, which was an undergoing. I did not anticipate. I've never made a documentary film, so I was very fortunate to have a great mentor and a terrific team. And we went back several times. Jeremy Lizelle is here tonight. He actually took that picture, and we are also working with a local crew. So this is a picture of me and Saurav Mandel, who's also a photographer, filmmaker, and then Rick Roy, who we'd been doing a lot of work with for finding solutions for the project.
Let me backtrack a little bit. So you obviously heard about this situation. You went and you visited. You saw what's going on. You thought it's tragic. There must be something I can do, I guess. So what was the epiphany for you that said, you know what, I got to make a film about it. I got to write a book about it. I got to drop everything. I have to go on a 2,300 kilometer voyage through this part of the world to try and see what can be done. What's the story? Is there anything that can change? Something must have clicked at some point in time.
Yeah, you know, at the very beginning, the very first time I went, I thought my partner and I, my photographer partner and I, we were just going to tell one story for a magazine about dying for likes, we were going to call it, because the elephants were killing people that were chasing them to take a selfie. And when I got there and started to see the story, I realized, who am I to just drop into a culture and with so much history and so much complicated relationship between humans and elephants, and I'm going to go tell that story? There's not a chance in hell I can tell that story. So then I was riveted by trying to find out what that story is and how to tell it in a way that was deeply respectful, but was focused for a Western audience, because what I realized was people in the West didn't know this was even going on. So I wrote the book over COVID, and then I thought, well, I'm really in the book a lot, and I want the people's voices that are experiencing the conflict to be the voices that are primarily speaking. So then I thought, well, I'll just make a documentary. So we came back and made a documentary. Sorry, Jeremy, for this photo. I love this photo so much. We were on the Indo-Nepal border in this photo. We got there in the morning and didn't really pack food or enough water, but realized that we needed to stay through the entire night because the farmers were protecting the crops. They were trying to harvest as fast as they could, but the elephant herds were coming that night. And we wanted to be there to film it, and boy, was it intense.
How many elephants in a herd?
Well, there's about 50 to 60 elephants. Typically, in a herd, it can be even more than that. But what's been happening in this region, which is fascinating, is that as the conflict increases, as the skirmishes increase, where the people are coming out and trying to stop the elephants from getting into the crops. And then the elephants are using almost a military strategy where they're breaking up into smaller herds. And they know that the forest department, who's in charge of corralling the elephants, can only be so many places at once. So the herds are now becoming smaller, and they break themselves up into little spots, and then they come together later at night. This night, when we were here, and we have this scene in the documentary, the elephants came, and actually people on both sides of the border on motorcycles chased the elephants down the riverbed so that they get away from the crops, both on the Nepal side and the India side, with walkie-talkies. They're not. That's not legal. I mean, they're not supposed to be communicating, but they were. And then, to Jeremy's and my shock, like next thing we know, the guys are coming in on their motorcycles across the border after chasing the elephants down, and then they're like, "Hey!" But they're Nepali, and they're hanging out with the Indian farmers.
So then the Civil War starts.
Yeah. So then they're basically taking the matters into their own hands in that particular situation. But of course, you drive the elephants down, and what happens then, all these communities at the other end, the elephants go off into those fields. So it's a game of ping pong all night long.
So it is interesting that you say legally the humans aren't allowed to communicate when they're trying to corral the elephants. Yet
With the other side of the
with the
country,
other-
into like their border. It's a border.
Right. Politically,
Yeah,
they're not
and-
allowed.
correct.
Because the elephants are obviously
Yeah.
communicating among each other.
The elephants are
So-
roaring in the forest. You can hear, I mean, Dave was with me through that. You can hear the elephants. Well, this is the film. The documentary is called Where the Forest Roars. And the name of the documentary, the name Where the Forest Roars, came from the very first time I ever experienced the conflict in real time, which I read a small piece of. We were out all night on motorcycles, following the elephants around as they were everywhere. And while you could hear the sirens and the sound guns, you could hear those happening everywhere. Also, you could hear the elephants, and they were roaring like these bellowing, bone-shaking roar that were off in the forest, and they were speaking to each other. You almost had the sense that they were saying, okay, they're over here, so we're going to go over here. But I now know, of course, that it's a very angry roar.
Do you have a recording of them roaring?
I do,
Can
actually.
you play that now? Do you have that?
Let me think about that for a second. I'd have to dig a little bit for it.
Okay, maybe.
I'm
Or you can
almost-
imitate the roar.
Well, actually, the roar is on the trailer. I'm about to show you the little movie trailer, the quick movie trailer, documentary movie trailer, and that roar is it's on there. I just realized. So here is our movie poster. And if we go to the next, this is the documentary trailer.
I guess
Sounds
that's the
like a
roar.
lion, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And it's interesting. When I first saw the title and I saw the little clip before, I said, "Where the forest roars." Why? What about? I don't remember elephants roaring in sounds like a lion. And I saw your picture with your great mane of hair, and I thought, okay, it's about lions, but no. I think it'd be very scary to be in those positions. You hear 50 elephants roaring like that coming at you. I think it's sheer terror.
It's a very interesting. I was afraid to go out. I kept putting it off and putting it off. When I was in India that time, I wanted to experience the conflict, but I was afraid to actually go out all night and sleep in the village. And and then my fears were confirmed, because when we were out all night doing it, it was absolutely, utterly terrifying. I mean, okay, see that polar bear? Times that by 5, 6, and it's dark. You're coming around the corner, walking, and there's that eating a tree, and then looking at you, and probably maybe doing nothing, or taking their trunk and swiping you, and you're dead. That's the reality. Or there's that giant one elephant coming into your house with their trunk, just moving in their house so you can find food, the elephant's thinking, but they're destroying the entire house and stepping on people in the house. But there are these amazing stories too of elephants that have come into a house, and the parents have run out, but the child was left in the house, and the elephant picked up the child. This is not an urban myth. Picked up the child, brought the child out to the lane, set the child down, went back into the house,
And smash the house.
and ate the food, and smashed the house.
That's amazing.
So this is why I can't stop going back and finding out more. Every time I go, there's new stories, new things to learn, something I didn't know before. So
how did the villagers feel, though? I asked you that before.
yeah.
I mean, are they looking for a solution? Do they want to get rid of the elephants? Do they respect them? They have to have mixed feelings.
They do have mixed feelings, and mostly they're angry at the forest department, who is tasked with an impossible job. The forest department is tasked with keeping the elephants, apparently, into the forests. Well, there's no
enough
seamless route to the through the forest. So, and the forest department is not well funded. It's a thankless job, and they don't have a lot of the tools that they need. So they've been starting to work with nonprofit organizations, and the villagers themselves are now learning how to be the first responders, and they're doing all these educational programs so that kids aren't afraid of elephants. And those things are really effective, and they're working. But because it's kind of like Horton Hears a Who. Do you remember that Dr. Seuss story? Where Horton Hears a Who, it's like there's this whole world saying, we're here. And frankly, everyone's looking at African elephants. So what's happening with the Asian elephants, people are focused on the captive Asian elephants, but not really understanding and knowing what's happening at the small level. So at this level, so what's happening is that people aren't getting the infrastructure, the resources, the funding, the political will, the things that other elephant communities are enjoying internationally.
Now, I saw in looking at your material that a lot of this area has been turned into tea plantations. So I assume these are probably large companies that own acres and acres of the land?
It's the tea plantations have been there for almost 100 years or more now. So the landscape is very much checkered with tea plantations, and the elephants do get stuck in there and they struggle in there. There are efforts now so that the tea plantations are working towards like elephant-friendly tea. If you see elephant-friendly tea, that's the tea plantation owner is working to make their plantation accessible for elephants or rewilding areas. So,
What's elephant-friendly tea?
so what that means is,
Will we see that on labels of tea?
yeah,
like
yeah,
this?
there are
tea is
actually
elephant
teas
friendly?
that so the woman that we've been working a lot with is from Nuxalbari Tea, which is a fifth generation family tea estate, and she actually, and third generation of women tea estate owners, she actually lets the elephants just move through her property. She's educated all her community, 1,000 members of her community, to stay away when the elephants come on the property, and the elephants avoid, they don't do damage. It's almost like they have some kind of an understanding completely. So
Whose phone is
I don't
that?
know, but I thought it was the timer.
Well, that's pretty interesting
Yeah.
to me. Anyway.
Yeah.
And why don't you mention to the audience what you told me about the fence, that Nepal put up a fence to force the elephants to go into that little narrow neck
Mm-hmm.
of India, but the elephants are pretty clever.
The
and they
elephants
figured a
are
way around
clever.
it.
So, elephants don't know boundaries. So this area, of course, has many countries attached to it, but the elephants have ancient roots that they've been following for thousands of years. And the laws in India protect elephants. The laws in Nepal are changing, but they don't protect elephants as well. So they built a wall, an energized fence, to keep the elephants out. And so the first video I showed, the elephants are pooling around. Well, last year, the elephants have finally figured out a way to get through the fence. And I was talking to somebody that has been studying elephants that are going through the solar fencing, which is a good solution for, but you need constant monitoring for the fencing because apparently the elephants do three things. One, they either get a log and take the log and they move the log and then they step over the electric part of the fence.
Clever fellows.
Yes. And then it's also been observed, that some bull elephants, the male elephants, of course, would just plow through the fence. So they're like, okay,
know some people like
we
that.
just want to get through the fence, but we're just going to suffer the electric shock so we can get to the other side. And then apparently, the person that has been observing the solar fence was telling me that there are a couple elephants who use like a Michael Jackson moonwalk, that the elephants walk backwards with the shuffle on their feet, and that they go through the fence that way. So now the Nepal fence has been damaged, and elephants have been coming through. And sadly, 7 elephants in this past 8 months, in the past year, have been killed on that by farmers on that side.
Wow.
Post.
Pretty interesting.
Wait. Whoa.
Stop that one.
Okay,
No,
you can
not
reverse.
right there.
Quick, take that picture off.
Yeah.
Phoebe. Oh wait, couldn't she hear us? Oh yeah,
Okay.
that's the. Yeah,
Do you
continue.
want to show something here?
Well, if we're ready, where did you have a question you want to ask?
Okay, I do have a question.
Then I'm ready to
Right.
answer it.
So you see how you've observed, and people are observing this, how highly intelligent the elephants are, and they have their own military-type strategies to
Yes.
overcome everything. And yet at the same time, they can show compassion to the humans when they
Yes.
want. And the humans are probably both the same way. They can show compassion to the elephants, or they can just try and kill them.
That's right.
One of the two. So what are the solutions that you see? I mean, what, is it a détente? Is it going backwards,
Détente.
forward? Where does it go from here? Where does Kim Frank come into play? Can you move it in any particular direction, or would you like to move it in a direction?
I'm glad you asked that question because, I just spent the last year sitting for months at a time, weeks at a time, in an editing bay with the editor that I've worked with on the documentary, and I'm watching the footage over and over and over and over and over, and at the end of the film, I wrote how I want it shaped, and I want the film to end on hope. I want the film to end on solutions, and there are solutions. But boy, I was spending a lot of time steeped in the conflict and feeling kind of discouraged about the level of the conflict and the severity of the conflict. And more images were coming in from this area that were really, really upsetting, like elephants being set on fire, elephants being chased by massive mobs into the water with babies, and horrible, horrible things. And I'm thinking, what can I possibly do, and what can possibly be done? And so I just came back actually about 3.5 weeks ago. This map that you see here, I wanted to trace the entire Asian elephant, the ancient migration routes, all the way from the Indo-Nepal border to Arunachal Pradesh, which is way high up on the top of the northeast state. And these routes have been employed by elephants for centuries. But what I wanted to do was not follow the elephants. I wanted to follow their path, but I wanted to talk to the people who've been living with elephants for generations and see what they're doing and see if I could find stories that show what was happening before or what's happening now. And what I found after going 1,400 miles, I went up to the highest place that elephants have ever been found, which was thrilling, which I'll show that clip in a second. I interacted with people from 12 different tribal communities, 5 different religions, several different languages, and I found meaningful hope throughout the entire trip, where once there had been a broken bond with the forest, and the people living in that forest, next to that forest, recognized that they broke the bond, and now they're rebuilding the forest and rebuilding the relationship, and it's working.
So they actually reinstating the original trails, letting it reforest?
They've been
And the elephants
rewilding.
can find those trails again?
Many of the tribal communities have actually given their own land to the elephants. So they've rewild. I got to visit places where they've taken parts of their own community and turned it completely into a wild
And the
space.
elephants
And the
recognize-
elephants are coming
They
back.
recognize that that's the
Yes.
ancestral trail.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So it's pretty amazing.
So I got one more question
Yeah.
for you before we get to that.
To my, I
no,
did it.
about those alpine elephants.
Yes,
So when you did this grand adventure, which took you, what, 5 weeks?
yes.
All right. How did, there's a lot of adventurers here and everybody has the same problem. Where do you get the money? How do you do the logistics? How'd you put this project together, a project that you really had no prior experience
Yeah.
before?
Well, I was hell-bent to do it. My husband was not really a fan. I wrote some grants. I had to leave for the trip before I got the answer on the grants. I just found out not have shocks on his car, and my God, like well, it was a journey. Yeah, a real journey. But, half of it, I told myself this time, I just needed to plan enough to know. We did this other big component, which was a language component, to a translation app component that I did at the beginning of it with an Explorers Club member who's doing AI translation to see if that could.
How many languages did you have to deal with?
He has offered to take all my recordings and translate all of them. But the challenge is that there's probably in one recording with one person, English, Hindi, Assamese, and then maybe Bodo or a different tribal community language, all in one interview, in one person speaking.
That's why the elephants get confused.
Yes, it is why
Don't
the
know what
elephants
everyone's
get
saying.
confused. For sure.
You showed me this clip, which I know you have here, which I found fascinating, because most of us think of these are basically
Yeah.
tropical elephants, but they're not really. And you can explain why.
So I had read that elephants had been found at this highest elevation, 9,000 feet, 10,000 feet, and I wanted to see for myself if there was any evidence of that, and talk to the local communities and see if I could find it. We almost didn't get there, and then we ran into, anyway, we made it. But here's what happened. The rest of my team went off on a road, and I saw there were all these prayer flags, and I started walking up the trail, and then I saw dung, and I was like, oh my God, there's elephant dung is right here. And then I just kept walking, and it's really thick with bamboo, and there's mountains, like you're way high up. It's called Eagle's Nest Sanctuary, and then I saw footprints, elephant footprints, and then I was walking in the footprints of the highest elevation elephants, and I was so thrilled and beside myself. And then when we came back down, there was our driver is Buddhist, and I asked, why are all these prayer flags here? Thinking, it's because of the elephants. And he said, when the Dalai Lama escaped from Tibet, he walked this path. And
The elephant path.
The actual same path. So that was a mic drop for me.
And what elevation?
Done.
What elevation were you at?
We were at like 9,500 feet.
So it's pretty amazing that these elephants that are normally in the lowland
Yes.
are quite comfortable going up to the alpine area. high
They
altitude.
said there were about 20 elephants through that section. I can barely even picture. Well, you'll see how thick it is. I mean, I'm going to show you this video because I want to share with you the moment because it was so special.
So they're preparing
me.
for the next ice age, I guess.
Yeah, then maybe so. But Phoebe, we can show myself now.
I'm not really a big fan of
Maybe turn it up.
selfie videos. I'm sure as heck not a host, but I've reached the epicenter of my quest. I'm at the top of Eagle's Nest in Arunachal Pradesh, one of the highest places on earth where elephants have been found, and I'm literally walking the elephant trail that the route trail they take over the mountain at high elevation. He said sometimes as much as 20 elephants, and they're eating bamboo, and I'm seeing in their dung little sprouts. It's so beautiful up here. I can't believe I made it.
So do these elephants get short of breath at high altitude, like us?
No, I don't know. I didn't see one. In fact, I said to Saurav, who's not only, very talented photographer, but he also had worked extensively with the elephant conflict. And I said, wait, these prints are pretty fresh. And I said, what if we run into the elephant? And he said, you'll be killed. So I said, oh,
Nice to
okay. So, yeah.
Well, I think, you deserve a lot of credit for, out of the blue, coming up with this concept to look at this problem and get yourself there and do what you've done and write a book and make a film that's coming out this summer.
Hopefully, I'm submitting to film festivals now. And, yeah, stay tuned.
So I think this concludes our formal interview.
Yeah.
And now Kim is available for all your questions you may have.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Thanks for coming. Thank you for coming.
Are the social patterns of the Asian elephant similar?
Hold on, Rob, hold on.
Are the social patterns of the Asian elephants similar to the African elephant, which is basically matriarchal, and the young boys are kicked out of the herd, and the men come around, or
Yes.
the bulls come around during mating season, and then they're basically bachelors. Is it the same thing? And I had another question too.
Thank you for asking that question. It's very similar. They are finding there's a nuance in the Asian elephants with the matriarchs, that they actually are taking turns being matriarchs of a herd. And that could be because of the close proximity to humans and some of the barriers that they have to overcome. Something I also learned very recently, too recently for my own comfort, frankly, was that at the very end of the sound check for the documentary, you augment some of the elephant sounds, obviously, because you're filming. And I had done we had the elephant sounds as you pull them for the film. And at the last minute, I was like, wait, oh, sheesh, these are African elephants. And so we quickly, has anyone recorded for the purpose of using for documentary film Asian elephant sounds? And thank God, one person, niche guy had, and we quickly downloaded the whole thing. And the sound guy who cried when he watched the documentary said for free, I probably shouldn't have said, that he would go back and fill in all the Asian elephant sounds after studying the social structure, because I gave him a list of when they'd be saying different things roughly, and he applied it, how they might be, because Asian elephants actually have a much wider vocabulary.
Range, yeah, right.
So they chirp, they squeak, things that African elephants don't do. So I'm fascinated by that.
Just a point, years ago, I'm a bird hunter, and I was in Botswana, and there they make these big complexes to keep the kudus and the big antelopes out of the place, and they're 18 feet electrified fence, and it's about 10 miles across.
Wow.
And the bulls, no problem. They just go right
go
through
for
it. And they walk 10 miles and they go right up because that's their path, and they know it's their path.
Well, and it's interesting because with the Asian elephants, not all males have tusks. And the Machna elephants that's what they call the male elephants that don't have tusks are called Machna elephants. And they tend to be kind of like, they're the rebel rousers. They're the ones often that are, they're not as attractive to the ladies because they don't have the big long tusks, and they're a little mad about that. So they're the ones often giving the most trouble.
Yeah, question, are there any efforts along the migratory paths to provide feeding grounds or anything for the elephants?
Yes, actually. There have been some initiatives which are quite fascinating to me, where they actually are growing crops specifically for the elephants along the fringe areas, so that not only are they rewilding spaces with native plants that the elephants love to eat, but there are also some areas where they're actually experimenting. In fact, they're doing this in Yunnan province in China, where they're actually growing an actual crop area because they are getting a lot of nutrition. Then it's one solution.
So the science of migration is fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Have you studied that? And I wonder, how do they know that that's the migratory route over thousands of years? Where they only live for 100 years or whatever.
They learn from, it's actually a critical question because they learn from the generation before them, so that they've been following the same routes, and then they teach the young the same routes. But one of the urgent things that's happening is now that the matriarchs are teaching their young that you divert your route to go eat the crops. And it used to be that the migration season, so it's not like a bird migration. The migration is the elephants are eating their way. They eat so much, and the forest replenishes in their wake. So they eat their way all the way through, and then they eat their way all the way back. Things have a chance to regrow as it's moving. Okay.
No, you're fine.
Oh, got it. Okay. Anyway, so what's happening is it's getting, even though they stay on the same route, they're now diverting for food, and they're teaching their young that that's now how you access food.
And they're fertilizing along the way.
Absolutely. They grow the forest, which is why the tribal communities know them as the gods of the forest, because they create the forest.
So you tell me there was a question online?
No.
Oh.
I'm just saying wrap it up.
Oh, wrap it up. Okay. Well, let's take Can we do, there's 2 more questions?
I know he was going like this, and I'm like, wait, now me? What?
So do any of the locals train and work the elephants so that you've got working elephants as well as wild?
Yes, there's a whole storyline about captive working elephants in India that I do go into the book that we probably don't have time to do here. But the Forest Department actually employs working elephants to help conservation efforts in the national parks.
All right, we got 1 more question, and then Kim will be here for a little bit, and
Yep.
Yeah,
she'll personally answer your question.
I'm curious, like, where people were living for thousands of years before all these political borders came into play, and they know that this is the elephant migration route, why would they settle in there? Or how did that happen? Wouldn't they just sort of stay out of that lane, maybe?
Well, that's something I learned a lot more about on this trip. And what people were saying is, at that time, there was an easy coexistence because there were less people. The elephants would come through. They had enough to eat in the forest. They kept in their lane. People kept in their lane. So it's the settlements that are now moving into the actual migration paths. Oftentimes, they're they're people who have spilled over from the border and are illegally in the area, and they're settling in the path. Or they're developing the path. And there have been initiatives, the Wildlife Trust of India has actually moved entire villages with support, international support, moved entire villages out of the path somewhere else.
All right, well, I think that wraps it up for right now, and Kim will
Thank
be
you.
available for a little bit. Did a great job.
Thank you so much.
Fascinating story.
Thank you.